So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about The Passenger, your new film, which I absolutely loved. Despite, admittedly, I did shed a tear or two, so
Good.
I enjoyed it to that degree. So I just want to quickly ask. So obviously, the story was written by Jack Stanley. So first of all, could you tell me how you got involved in the script and what sort of drew you to wanting to direct it?
Yeah, I had this was a Blumhouse production, and I had worked with Blumhouse previously. I did a movie called Midnight Kiss for their series called Into the Dark. And so I'd worked with them prior, and this was part of a slate of movies that they were doing for streaming. And so we had talked about working together again, and we had talked about a couple of different projects, and like they didn't, there wasn't a great fit for one reason or the other. And then I just kind of said, would you be open to me bringing in a script that I might find and might find really interesting, knowing the sort of the parameters and the type of productions that they were doing with these. And I had read stuff of Jack's before and always really loved what I'd read of his. And he pulled this script out of a drawer and dusted it off. It was, I think, one of the first scripts he ever wrote. And, it kind of fit within the scope and the scale of what these movies were, how they were set up. And so, even though it's not a traditional sort of straight up horror film, like I think it was really exciting for everyone to kind of explore, a slightly, parallel path where, it was maybe a little more character based or a little more thriller genre as opposed to straight up horror. And it was fun for me because I've done a bunch of horror stuff. And what I find the most interesting about horror is, the sort of relationships at the heart of whatever the horrific thing that's happening is. And that's what I think The Passenger has, so square at the center, is this heart of this relationship between these two unlikely friends.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you've basically summarized what my next question was going to be, because obviously Blumhouse, they're quite well known for these big, flashy, sort of over the top jump scare kind of horrors that rely on, they're brilliant, don't get me wrong, but they rely on like a lot of CGI and a lot of, your typical jump scares, whereas The Passenger's like a lot darker in tone, relies, as you said, a lot more heavily on the emotions of the relationships and the characters. What was it like sort of working on a film like this compared to more sort of gory body horror like The Ruins? Is it quite a different experience?
Filmmaking is never easy, no matter what type of film you're making, but there's something about what Kyle Gallner and Johnny Birchtold were doing, like the opportunity for them to create this really intensely intimate relationship, like they're trapped together, for the whole movie takes place in less than 24 hours. And so, to watch that and to get to create that from scratch was super exciting. And there wasn't, obviously we have stunts and there actually is like a whole lot of blood at certain parts, as but like primarily, at the core are these two characters. And so creating that was something that, because it was at the center of the film, we got to spend a lot of time, making sure that developed in a way that felt true and real and sort of as unexpected as it would be in this sort of crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean, their performances were both incredible. As I said, I won't give away anything, but I was reduced to tears by the end of it. They were both incredible. Can you sort of speak to how much input you have in how they actually sort of deliver certain lines and things like that? Is it all, is it down to a specific actor on how they deliver something, or are you quite specific with how you want certain bits said and done?
I never like to try to give line readings. Like I think that if you cast it really well and you cast the right actor for the part, then there shouldn't be any of that. I mean, I think that there are certainly times when I would go in and be like, okay, like how can we say this with less words? Like
Yeah.
this feels a little talky, or like this feels a little like the word here that I want to, like the only three words that I care about in this speech are this one, and this one. Like let's find a way to like sort of state what it is you're saying, but just hit these points. I kind of like working with them that way and giving them a lot of freedom to kind of do with it what they will, because with the case of Johnny and Kyle, like they were, in my opinion, like perfectly cast. Like both of them just like really shined in a way that went exceeded all my expectations. So like I was constantly like at the monitor, like ecstatic that what we were getting was so incredible.
Yeah. Did you have a lot to do with the casting? Because obviously
Yeah,
Kyle he's quite a big horror actor.
yeah,
Johnny, I have followed for years. He's sort of more of an up and coming horror actor. He's got some really
yeah.
great roles at the moment. Was that
And
sort of,
he's a huge horror fan too.
yes,
Like Johnny is an incredible horror fan. So like for
yeah,
him to get to be in a film like this, that it's kind of horror adjacent, but still like we get to had all of these special effects and the blood. Like he was so excited. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we saw a ton of people, and it was just about figuring out what the what pairing would be the most exciting on screen. um
yeah.
and I will say that like they were both, because casting projects you have to come up with multiple names, but they were both my number one choice.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you made a great choice. As I say, I am a personal fan of both of them. So it's really exciting for me as a big horror fan to see them both together. It was
nice.
great.
Yeah, yeah,
One of the questions that I wanted to ask was that I know that sometimes when actors are playing in like quite dark roles, for example, the most recent one I can think of is Evan Peters talking about how it was to play Jeffrey Dahmer and how it sort of had an impact on his own mental health and things like that. It got me thinking, does that apply for like the directors as well? When you're working on like a really heavy sort of production, a lot of heavy themes, a lot of heavy scenes, do you find that it has an impact on your mood too, and on an impact on what the set's like? Sort of, I'm just imagining, when you finish a scene and you yell cut, do you then just go back to everything's like light and happy and joking around like your friends, or does it still sort of stay quite
I mean
somber?
it depends on the scene. Like if it's a scene that is actually requires the actors to really um expose themselves in a way, and sort of open themselves up in a way that can be kind of frightening. It's nice to keep things incredibly intimate, and make sure that the energy of the crew and the that everything is kind of fades away from them, um, and kind of give them the space and the time to feel safe to do that stuff, because it can be pretty it can be pretty easy to get sucked into a um like heaviness. I mean, and on this one, I think that we were pretty good about like you know keeping things light. And the thing about this script in particular is that there's there are these incredibly dark things that happen, but then there are also like there's this kind of strange thread of comedic back and
Mhm.
forth between them that kind of develops as they become friends, that was always this lightness that we could sort of look to when things got too tough. And I think that the way that they're woven together in the story is really smartly done uh in the script, because you're not living for you know long periods of time in darkness and then switching to it's sort of it's woven together really really um successfully, I think.
Yeah, there were definitely a few times where I sort of found myself smirking at things that Kyle said, and then sort of thinking, "Oh, I probably shouldn't be laughing at that." But yeah, he was quite amusing in some scenes, and I had to sort of remind myself that I probably
Yeah.
shouldn't be supporting him here.
Well, but the thing is, like he has to win Randy over. Like he wins Randy
Mhm.
over, and you need to, as an audience, we need to understand what it is that he's doing that wins Randy over. Like that we need to understand how it is that he's able to help Randy so, sort of profoundly by the end of the film. And that comes from, being human and being vulnerable and being silly and funny when, in certain moments, and incredibly serious in others.
Yeah. And so sort of on that same theme as what you've just said, to me, the film did sort of come across of more of like a friendship sort of coming of age film rather than a horror. That's not at
Yeah.
all a criticism. I
Yeah.
like I say, I loved it. But there seems to be like a trend of combining the two genres together, like coming of age and horror. What do you think it is about those two genres that sort of work so well?
Well, I think that, I think that the most exciting thing about horror is, what happens with the people at the heart of the story. Like how, as an audience, how are we invested in what's happening to these people? And I think that seeing characters, like, coming of age is such a sort of classic uh, story trope that anyone can identify with, I think. And so, to sort of weave them together, there's a real sense of I think that people can probably see themselves in Randy and in Johnny's character a little bit. But I think that, at the end of the day, the best horror has characters that you care about deeply, at the heart of the story. And whether that's, because it's a coming of age story, or because it's, a relationship story or a love story, like, just having characters that are, sort of wedged into stories in order to get killed or terrorized is not enough for audience. I mean, maybe it's enough for some audiences, but like, as a genre fan myself, like, it's never been enough for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I think we've only got 1 minute left, but I'll just ask you one last question then.
Yeah.
For people like me who are fans of this film, fans of The Ruins, obviously you seem to be a horror fan. Does that mean that we can expect more horror from you in future?
Yes, of course. Yes,
Great.
nothing that I can share about quite yet, but like, yeah, I'm going nowhere. I'm got both feet squarely in horror.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank
You
you.
too.